today's podcast episode.
Don't do that. Nobody wants us to be radio people.
I wanted to try it.
On today's podcast, we're going to interview Nate Demars.
But seriously, today's episode is with Nate Demars.
And Nate is
the owner of Pursuit.
And he
can't finish each other's
sentences.
You go.
Okay. What do we do? Do we talk about Nate still?
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. That was a little... If someone was listening, they would be like, what?
If it's your first time listening,
Sorry.
This is kind of what it's like. And if you like this,
I think it's going to be
subscribe.
really great, though, because I think our guests keep us from being so weird.
Yeah, right.
And these intros are, like, a little much, and then the interviews are, like, normal.
Yeah, so if you can stomach this, then the rest is going to be easy.
Just, like, do the fast forward by 15 seconds at a time.
Yeah. We should make all of our intros the same speed so people know when to skip to.
True.
We're the same,
always at the
just
length.
skip to the 2-minute 13 mark and then it's done.
For sure.
Psych, we've got an advertisement there. Just kidding, we don't have advertisements.
No.
Yet. If you'd like to advertise,
yeah,
send us money.
I was thinking next season we could make up fake advertisements.
Oh my gosh, that'd be killer.
Where we have like scripts.
Right. We could have your mom do one via her old lady impersonation.
Oh yeah, my mom dresses up like an older woman. Oh, sorry.
We're going to have an older woman advertise next month.
You'll never know.
And I'm a Nut, I think is her name.
Yep.
We're going to get her on the internet.
Oh my gosh,
that's been a lifelong goal.
True.
Nate Demars is the founder, starter, beginner, owner of Pursuit, which is a suit company in the short north of Columbus. Mm-hmm. And Nate, we worked with Nate for a year, but I remember hearing about Pursuit before we had actually even started the Wonder Gym. Mm-hmm. And it was like they had a food truck that had suits in it. I remember that being the thing. They had like the suit mobile, Pursuit mobile.
But it was an old food truck?
Yeah. I mean, it's a truck.
Okay.
I mean, it wasn't a food. I don't think it has the equipment in it to make food.
Got it.
It was more of like a pop-up boutique truck.
Yeah.
But I remember thinking, because that was like the thing that was cool then.
Oh, that's good.
To put everything in a truck, and
totally.
it was cool.
Mm-hmm.
So Nate's been around, and I remember when he first contacted us, it was one of those things where you've respected a company kind of from a distance for a while, and then he contacted us, and us being kind of like, oh, this is cool.
Yeah.
It was it was like a local business that we had paid attention to, had always thought was doing cool stuff.
It's true.
And we were excited to get a chat with him. So he doesn't know this, and we will never say this to his face, but it was kind of an honor just to get an inquiry from him.
Yeah, we were excited about it, and we've been doing a lot of their marketing, design, and photography for the past year, and it's always fun to sit down and talk to him. You know, I would consider everyone on this podcast that we interview more a friend, but it's cool when clients
unless there's a frenemy.
Oh, true. We probably wouldn't tell you if it was a frenemy.
We're going to announce that.
Oh, okay.
Like, this is our frenemy, Steve.
Got it. No, I think we're actually having someone named Steve on this podcast. So
oh, right, yeah.
That's not true.
But we're having, right.
Steve-O.
Steve-O?
I don't know. Stevia.
Stevia. I don't like stevia.
This is sponsored by Stevia.
Right. It's not. If you'd send us money, though, Stevia, we're into it.
Stevia is like a plant.
Nate talks about the origins of kind of where this all came about, and talks about some of the stories that he bumped into in his first couple of years, which were kind of funny.
Yeah.
But also not that different from a lot of random stuff that happens to people.
I think everyone we've probably talked to has experienced sleeping in their office or their brick and mortar when they don't necessarily want to be sleeping there.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. That's a weird fact that I'm throwing in.
I also think that the thing that I think that is interesting to me about Nate is Nate and his team at Pursuit are very into suits. Like, they know what the freak they're talking about. Mm-hmm. But they're not the type of people who are trying to, like, beat everybody over the head with fashion. Yeah. Nate is very much like, he's like, he'll talk more about this, but he started Pursuit because he thought those places were annoying. Mm-hmm. The typical places people go and buy suits, he's like, this isn't a good experience. Yeah. And so, so I think that is all we need to say about it.
Yeah. Wouldn't it be funny if Men's Warehouse was like the sponsor?
Yeah. Today is sponsored by the place that Nate hated so much, he started Pursuit. But for real, I hate suits. Pursuit will sponsor this via me
being an
endorsing
advertiser.
them.
Yeah.
I hated suits. When we started the Wonder Jam and I got to the point where I was like, okay, this is gonna work, I got rid of all of my like business dress up clothes and all of my like all black shoes. I got rid of anything I need to, every time I have a wedding, I have to like buy new stuff. I got rid of like any nice button up shirt I have. All I have is like flannels. And Nate invited us to a gala, and I went through their whole process of getting stuff tailored. One, their stuff is way more affordable than people think because they treat people so well and they have a cool brand. People sometimes think it's expensive.
Yeah. But
we have friends who have paid twice as much for a random suit off of a rack somewhere. Two, I kind of like wearing it.
Yeah, you liked it.
And now I'm like looking for excuses to wear it again.
Looking sharp.
So I've been wearing it around the house.
Yep. His jammies are now his suit. He's trying.
How do you say suit and jammies together?
You can't.
Sleepies, suits,
sujamas.
Sujamas?
Yeah.
Jam, jutes? No, there's nothing.
Yeah.
If you know a good mashup of the word jam and suit, please send it in.
Please write it in the comment section. Wait, I don't understand how this is being published.
Please just say it out loud right now.
In your room.
We're listening.
So I hope you enjoyed this interview with Nate, and we will talk to you soon.
Peace.
So Pursuit is a men's clothing store now located in the Short North that launched in the fall of 2011. So we are, as of today, getting close to 6 years in business. So Pursuit originally was a class project when I was in the MBA program at Ohio State. I took an entrepreneurship class towards the end of the program and pitched an idea because I had a lackluster suit buying experience at a department store, to remain nameless, and just pitched this idea in class because everybody had to pitch an idea on the second day of class. It was not something that I was particularly passionate about or had put a lot of thought into. It was just relevant to me at that moment, and I needed an idea. And from that, it slowly it got picked to be one of the class projects. There was maybe 7 of them, so then it had a quarter's worth of effort put into writing a business plan, and somewhere towards the end of that quarter, it started to seem like maybe this has some legs. And I had been studying real estate. I wanted to be a developer. That's why I'd gone back to school in the first place. I wanted to restore old buildings and turn them into things. And I had no real experience with that. And as I got closer to graduation, I realized it was also probably not a good time to get into that industry if you were looking for a job. Yeah. It was 2011 at that point, so it was that market was still pretty suffering from the recession. So at some point at the end of that project, it started to feel like this has some potential, and I always had an interest in entrepreneurship, but never really had an idea that I was serious about. And that was the first one at 27 or whatever I was at that point.
So entrepreneur, why would, when you say you had an interest in entrepreneurship, where did that come from?
I had been around business as a kind of career field since I was in high school. So my dad works at a family-owned manufacturing company in our hometown, and they were nice enough to let me do like an internship in their marketing department in high school. I was taking a high school marketing class and involved in an organization called DECA, which was like business competitions and education. So I was involved in business there. That kind of steered me towards getting a business degree when I went to college. So I got a marketing degree. I worked in a corporate sales and marketing job for a while, and then I got an MBA. So all of my career was in the business realm. And I think when you study that much business and you're around it, you naturally think like, maybe someday I'd like to start my own, or I'd like to be in charge, or whatever the motivation is in that process. But it was never like, I am absolutely going to do this, or I've had this idea I've been marinating on for years. It was just like, yeah, maybe someday I will. And then that just kind of, when this idea started to take hold, and I had pretty encouraging classmates who, wanted to help out and be involved. I had a professor who was real encouraging and enthusiastic about the potential of it, maybe before I even was. So it started to feel a little more real.
Yeah.
And then I took. This is my cheesy origin story that everybody I think is supposed to have. I went at the end of the quarter, because we were still on quarters at Ohio State back then. I went to Hocking Hills by myself. I rented a cabin in the woods to make this decision of like, should I do this or should I get a job? Because I am graduating with a good amount of debt in 3 months or whatever it was at that point. So I went off to Hocking Hills to be by myself in the woods for a couple days and like think about it. And I think I'd probably decided before I even went there that I was going to do it. But I just feel like I needed
well, you had to have an origin story where you did that, right?
Yeah. When it becomes a movie, that's going to be a great scene.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. That will be the whole movie. They'll overplay the origin story part. Yeah.
More like a wilderness story.
And you're like, actually, that was like 1 second of it. How long after class project is over do you open your first? Did you start with the truck, or did you start with space in Gateway?
Gateway. So we started as a pop-up originally.
Okay.
And actually, the very first thing that we did was a launch party with a pop-up store in it. And I don't know if that was before Kickstarter was like the thing to do. But shortly after we started, Kickstarter became the thing to do. But we thought, we have all these friends and classmates who just graduated with their MBAs, a lot of professors and alumni who are very encouraging. Let's raise some startup money by throwing a cool party.
Yeah.
And then within that, we'll sell some clothing. We'll have a little pop-up. We put a lot of time and energy into planning a launch party, and I think it basically broke even.
Nice.
But that was the first thing that we did as like a pop-up within our own party. And then October, so a month after that, we opened a pop-up store at the Gateway on campus with a 6-week lease or something to get through the end of the year. And so that was, graduation was in June, and the pop-up opened in October, so 5 months later.
Yeah.
So relatively short.
Yeah.
And the idea, I think, happened in January. So, from idea to real life was all within the span of a year, which I think is a little bit unique to the type of business that I started. Like, there's some businesses that it's not practical to think that you could graduate and 5 months later be a functioning business.
Right.
Yeah, everyone's so different. We've talked to people who are working on their thing for
5 years,
and then go into it full time. Everyone has just way different, a lot of different situations.
Right.
Well, I think what was easier for me, maybe a lot of people have an idea and they have like comfort or a job or something, and they have to decide to leave it. And I made that decision 2 years prior to go to grad school, and I didn't. I guess I could have stayed and got a PhD or something, but I had a finite back to the real world now.
Right.
So I didn't have to leave a job. I didn't have to adjust to being poor.
Yeah.
I had spent every dime
You
I had.
already were,
Yeah, right.
So the lifestyle adjustment was not that different for me than what I had lived through for the previous 2 years.
Yeah.
Other than kind of being more on my own and not having structure.
That's
how it was for me. I just talked to someone recently who started her own business, and she went from a high-paying retail corporate job to now doing her own thing, and she's like, that salary jump, well, basically from a salary to no salary, was insane. And I told her I went from making no money to making actually more money, pretty quickly.
Yeah, it's so different. Yeah, that's so different. Even people who go through coaching with me who are going through that transition, I sit and talk and I'm not the person who should be talking financial planning to people, but I'm talking to them in that way of, they're like, I make $65,000 a year at this job, and now I'm going to start doing this thing freelancing. And all right, we got to
you might
make a
have
transition
a little,
happen, you know.
Yeah. Or you might see a little bit of a blip, but it's possible.
You know what ends up happening is that people, we start to like dissect their budget, and the first thing I make everybody who gets a full-time paycheck do is, so when you tell me you make $70,000 a year, is take that and then tell me how much of it is taxes and how much of it is insurance. And nobody knows the answer to that straight up. And what that exercise does is it teaches them they actually only make like $42,000 a year, like taking it home. They don't, but they live, there's like, it always is this sort of watershed moment for them where they realize, oh, when I go apply for a loan for a car, or apply for when I'm planning my mortgage, or like think through my budget, I'm always thinking through $70,000 a year is this number in my head. But that is never an amount of money that I actually have.
Yeah.
Right.
So
They're planning all of I make $70K a year, so it means I make this much, so I can get a car that's like, this is my payment. I'm like, you never have that much money. You make $42,000 a year, which is dramatically different. I had like a recent conversation I had ended in tears because the person realized they were like on a hamster wheel that they would never get off of.
But that's even more pronounced as an entrepreneur. Like, last year 5 in existence, we finally made real money that on paper looks better than what I would have made with an MBA. But, you factor out taxes, which is a big chunk of it when you finally start making money. But then also, like, what else are you spending money on? So for me, it was paying off debt. It was expanding inventory. It was like, again, it's the net income number is starting to look more like a real thing. But you're still investing in like even more things it's a very long-term, you have to have a long-term perspective, I think. And maybe there's some businesses you can start where you start out almost as if you have a job and a paycheck right from day one. Mine is not the type that's the case.
For sure. Mine, I remember for years just being able to use the gear that I owned and like computer camera and no overhead. And the first year full time, I got my tax bill because I took home everything I made, and I was.
We wrote off nothing.
Yeah, I like did a horrible job as a business owner, but I just was taking everything, and I got my tax bill, and I like had a heart attack. And I'm just not a business person, so I wasn't even thinking of like writing things off or leaving stuff in my business account. But we paid debt off quickly. But it was just it was like a shock to the system. Yeah.
And we didn't make that much more. We didn't make that much more money for the next 2 years. Like the layman's didn't make more money for
after that.
Until like last week probably. Like very very recent.
As of this morning.
As of this morning. Well, like this more recently.
Yeah.
And so because it was all the growth, as revenue grew, just growth happened, but no more margin existed.
Right. So now you're in a new location. You're not on campus anymore.
Yeah.
What was that? Why did you decide to leave?
Yeah, that was one of the tougher kind of decisions or revelations, and it happened fairly far after the 2-year mark. But the original concept was that every college guy in America needed a suit at the very least for a job interview. A lot of them, when they start college, and they need a suit for whatever the student activities they're in. And I saw like this really dense population at Ohio State of students who all needed the same thing. They all wore the same general thing, and all seemed to be buying it from that same department store or big box suit store that I had been to, that inspired me to
not do that.
Right.
And it was clear that like all these stores were built and made their money off the dads of this demographic. So, I come at all of this not as a subject matter expert in any way. I didn't know anything about suits, and I didn't have any passion for fashion or retail, but a passion for business and strategy and those kinds of things. So I was excited about the idea that like you could do this really stripped down, simple suit store that was really targeted at a very niche demographic that was all able to be reached in very different ways. Like, social media had opened a lot of doors to marketing to college students, and word of mouth on a college campus is kind of a different way of spreading the word quickly. So I had this really well articulated, I think, vision of like making this niche suit store that could be kind of sent on a road show to college campuses around the country. It could live on campuses like this one that are in a city with a bigger population. And like 3 years in, I think I saw the growth that we had from the beginning plateaued, and it plateaued at a place where I felt like I was still working really hard. I still wasn't making money that was exciting to like, somebody's going to want to help me scale this business. And it was happening at the third largest university in the country, where I was teaching entrepreneurship.
Right, where you had a lot of network.
Home field advantage, and we ran the bar crawl at Ohio State, and we did like all of these things that no other business was doing, marketing on campus, and it still was only this. And I had to come to the realization that like we could work really hard and keep growing at Ohio State, but if it's not wildly successful here, how do I expect it to be wildly successful
when you go put
else?
it?
And as we had been in business a few years, the nice thing about a college-focused business is it's a steady stream of new customers coming in at all times. And what's kind of changed in Columbus in the 12 years that I've been here is that so many people, when they graduate, are not leaving anymore. So there's this population of people that bought their first suit from us that hopefully had a great experience and connect to the brand, that are not students anymore, and they don't want to hang out on campus anymore, but they have jobs, they have disposable income. Some of them get married as young as you guys got married, and they need a suit right out of college. And so I could kind of see that like there was always a population of students that were really passionate about what we were doing, but it was never everybody. Mom in Cleveland was still driving the purchase decision more so than son in Columbus, who really thought we were cool when I came and spoke to his class.
I remember my first suit was from Allie's dad.
Joseph A. Banks.
Did it like buy one get three free or whatever.
They have the best sales.
It was.
We had like.
Well, it also was like. I mean, I remember looking at the price tag on them, and it was like, this one's $850. I'm like, okay, so you just quadrupled. I understand what you're doing. Like the math works. You're like, I'll give you 4. But your dad had a job where he was wearing a suit every single day to work, and he was like, probably embarrassed that your husband didn't have a suit, so he's like, I'll get a bunch of suits and like I'll buy you one.
That's a marketing tactic we've never tried. Embarrassed father-in-law
like
approach.
how's your son-in-law dressed?
Right.
The pity approach.
That'll be the next campaign you roll out. It's like,
be like,
are you embarrassed by who your daughter's marrying?
That's a good.
We can help with some of that stuff.
Holiday season gift card campaign.
oh my gosh.
That would actually be funny. You could do a lot. Right.
I'm reading Brene Brown's book right now, and that's like
shame.
really shame. Like we should just not do that.
Okay. We shouldn't do that.
So it's about not using shame?
Yeah, it's about shame resistance and like resilience. So like don't do that.
Shame is a short-term motivator, and it burns you up. But it's like, So you don't have to. Michael, producer Tedesco, make a note to have the shame campaign for Pursuit.
Oh my gosh.
That'll go out in July.
It could be the cut-in sponsor right here. Brought to you by Audible.
And Joseph A. Banks.
It's funny.
Joseph A.
Oh my gosh, we talk about doing a podcast and everybody's like, oh, you're going to have Squarespace, Audible, the 7 things.
The Black Tux, Bonobos, all of my like digital competitors. That's their marketing campaign.
It's this podcast.
I mean, after working with you, Nate, though, a lot of those online competitors don't even feel like competitors anymore. They are in that the subject matter is the same, but talk a little bit about like the experience, like the feeling of being a part of your customers' lives and like what kind of service people get and how that's different than
Men's Warehouse or whatever.
Or online people.
Yeah, and I think what drew me to the idea of Pursuit originally was a suit is the most expensive thing you purchase, and most younger guys know very little about it. And they want help, they want advice, they go to the mall and they get kind of like in-your-face commission sales, or they get self-service. But it's a big enough purchase that you probably don't feel confident buying it online, or it's the thing you'll feel the least confident buying. It's not a t-shirt or jeans. So I think that was the niche that I saw right away was, and I took this from a strategy class, and I don't remember what the academic lesson really was, but the gist of it was you try to carve out a space that you're not likely to draw the competitor that could destroy you. And I saw Men's Warehouse as the far and away leader in my space. And I thought, we're picking something so niche and they're so corporate and so big that like the dollar amount of what I'm working on is not going to be a top priority to them. There's no way that they can genuinely be cool on a college campus. Like, that's just not how a $2 billion corporate mall.
Well, those,
store is.
I mean, they're selling stuff to people like your dad who have, I mean, your dad probably has 20 suits or did when he was working. I mean, you're not, it's just very different.
So I looked at like in the physical retail where most guys feel most comfortable buying their suits. I saw the mall stores that were just high volume, low service, and I saw like the kind of what I felt like was a baby boomer model of Men's Warehouse, Joseph A. Bank, and then I looked at like where's all the, is there another young me out there at every college campus? And there isn't, because most of those people with that creative energy are starting online brands. They're doing more premium luxury products, which are a little easier to start something when you're selling a shirt for $150 and you're selling a suit for $900.
Right.
The economies of scale are different and the margin is different. So I thought, like, we're going to a place where we're picking a challenge that's difficult, like being affordable and being not as quick to scale as an e-commerce company, but we're not likely to have anybody who's doing exactly what we're doing. So if we can make it work, there's huge potential for that.
Right.
So I saw like Bonobos is like they're the Stanford MBA version of Pursuit, and they had a Harvard business case written about them like the minute they launched. But anyways, I saw all the energy going into e-commerce, and it's obvious that that's the future in some capacity, but most guys don't buy their suits there, and none of that creative energy was going into brick and mortar, design a store for this demographic that's kind of forgotten. So the question about service, I think, is where you actually asked me. That's kind of become what's obviously unique about us and what brings the most value. Yeah. So I always say that like our suits are stylish, they're well made. There's like this quality that has to be there in order to have credibility and win people's business. But what's far more important than the product itself is the person that's helping you through the process. It's the being approachable and having advice for people on something they don't know much about. Feeling like you're not just selling them, but feeling like they can trust your advice. Right. And then the other part of it is, I think, making it about the individual who's there. So it's not just, hey, I'm Nate and I'm going to help you buy a suit and I'm going to spend 45 minutes with you, but it's let me ask you questions and get to know what you're buying this for, what the event is, what you've been working towards, because that's cool about suits. It's most guys, younger guys, don't wear suits every day to work like they would have 50 years ago or 75 years ago, but they tend to wear them for the major moments of their life. And making the experience at the store comfortable and about that event or that milestone moment for the customer is something that I don't think you can replicate on the internet as the internet is today. It's a very human thing. It's a very personal thing. So I think that's where we've decided to kind of build our concept, is in a place that we don't think anyone else is putting the energy in the way that we are.
What has been obviously challenging? We always say, like, if nobody's doing something, it's either because you're a genius or it doesn't work, right? So what have you found as far as when you were getting started or kind of bumping into these things? Obviously, you found out this demographic that felt like it's exactly who we want to target. I'm sure you still get a lot of students who come through Pursue, right? Yeah. And you still, like, market and reach out to the university, collaborate with the university. They just have to come 5 minutes down the street, right? When you were getting started, what did you bump into? How much of what you just told us as far as your strategy and what you're trying to do was something you set out to do, or how much of it was crafted by, we tried this a little bit, didn't work, or kind of experimentation?
I think I did not know the significance of the service. I thought of a suit as more of a commodity. Everybody going into the Ohio Union on career fair day was wearing the same exact generic thing: a black suit, a white shirt, a red tie. Like, let's just be the place that has a store that only sells that. So I thought about it as an MBA. Like, Men's Warehouse has got 50 suits in every size to choose from. That's millions of dollars worth of inventory, billions of dollars worth of whatever it is. It's like, it's a more costly, high overhead approach. So how are we going to sell a suit that a college guy or a young guy can afford without having the economies of scale of Macy's or Men's Warehouse? And so I came into it as a business person knowing that that's like the core challenge is like we're small volume, but we're not high price. So the economies of scale of that are different.
So you're focused on simplification and keeping things tight and for the audience and not too much choice when they walk in.
Stripped down, low overhead. So that was the initial approach. Was we had when we launched, we had 7 suits to choose from, 7 styles of suits, which is the smallest suit store I've ever been in, because, in terms of space.
What do you have now?
We have 7 suits in stock at all times, and then we usually have another 15 or 20 kind of unique, seasonal, different things on top of that. Cool. So we still have that same core, the guy that buys a suit once every 5 years that needs the basics. We still have that. Now it's our own Pursuit line. In the early days, it was Tommy Hilfiger or DKNY, where the economics of that are not as good because you're paying a royalty to somebody for a name that you wish wasn't in your clothing. You'd rather it be your own. So a lot of the problem with all of this was just, most people go the boutique route, and it's you're really into fashion. You build a store full of things that you wish you could find, and it's usually for people that pay more attention to fashion, spend more money on it. So it's usually more luxury products or higher end products, and that's. From the beginning, we knew we weren't a boutique. We're trying to be very mainstream in our price. We're trying to be accessible to an audience that maybe doesn't know or doesn't care about. So I knew that was a challenge from the beginning. But I think what I learned was it's not even the product. We could have 7 suits or we could have 25 suits. It's the customer experience and the people part of it that still is way more important than just what product is there. And I think what was kind of cool from the beginning is we would have people in our early days who bought a DKNY suit from us, and they had no idea they bought a DKNY suit, and they'd come in and 3 years later to get a new suit, and they'd tell you, I bought this one from you guys 3 years ago. They had no idea that it was somebody else's brand at the time, because the experience was
so strong.
It was about us. So that was kind of validating that it's not the product. The product is critical, but it's not the thing that
That's
we
why
win
someone
with.
came back.
No, that's really cool. Rings really true to my experience. I mean, I hated suits, and before we started recording, I was sitting here talking about how I want some more. Which you told me would happen. You looked at me and you were like, sometimes when people get a suit that finally fits right, and stop, because I had just bought stuff off the rack.
I remember shaming you.
So that was the second suit I bought. I officiated my sister's wedding. We were driving there, and I had put off buying a suit just because it's an annoying shopping experience when you're just doing it yourself. And I bought one at a Kohl's on the way to the wedding.
It looked so great.
It was horrible. It was the worst thing. I see pictures from that, and I want to.
It kind of looks like he's wearing a tent.
This segment is not brought to you by Kohl's.
No, they are not sponsoring.
But did you use Kohl's Cash?
No.
We didn't even get any Kohl's Cash.
I'm from Wisconsin, so Kohl's.
Kohl's
following of people that
love it,
live for that cash. I've never.
They've created their own
remote
community.
enough that we didn't have a Kohl's. We had to go an hour away to go.
Oh, really?
So,
Dang.
Yeah.
We grew up in the same town.
Yeah.
I was 45 minutes from Kohl's.
We had a Kohl's pretty close.
Yeah. But that rings really true as far as the experience of being like, after I wore a suit for an hour, I was like, I kind of like this. It fits well and it's nice. Versus when we started working for ourselves, I got rid of all of the shirts I had that had collars. Every button-up shirt I had, I got threw away. So which is my own problem, probably.
Right.
That is, you have to have an origin story, and then you also have to have this liberating, it's like the burn your bras in the 60s. It's burn your suits and that.
We actually had an entrepreneur women's panel here, and our friend Simi was like, I burned all my wired bras when I started my own business, and this other woman was like, I want to do that. I want to burn my wired bras.
I had that became that event, that panel was remembered as the
burning of the
bra thing. I was like, Yeah, it was wild.
But it does. You got to do that, you know.
Wired bras, not all bras. Just
wired
the
bras.
wired bras. Yeah. This part is not sponsored by Wired Bras.
But I think your brand, at least when you put yourself in the center of it, like we all do here, like it takes on your own personality.
Yeah.
And for me, like I like to think of us as, and I think one time our retail, they always, when they do articles, they always pull in an expert. There's a couple guys in town that are like the go-to, like macro retail people, and I think one of them described us one time as the anti-suit store or something like that. And I'm like, like not in a punk rock way, but that really is what we are. Like you see me at Stoff's wearing sweatpants at 9 a.m. because like suits aren't my favorite thing in the world. Yeah. But we're the place that people some people love them, but some people don't.
And what that means is like friendly, like what does that actually translate to in real life is that you don't walk into a big box place with like 7 commission salespeople like hunting you down, being like, what can I hand you right now?
We relate to that in that when we work with people, we try to maximize their budget and tell them honestly what's worth spending money on. Like, I think we're not going to just be like, oh, here's like our most premium options, so do you want to work with us? But rather like, don't spend money on that, do this. And I think
we probably
there's times where I preface a lot of things I say with like, this is kind of seems weird because I create logos for a living, but don't spend a lot of money on this, Yeah.
Your logos don't matter, but we sell them.
Yeah, right. But I think that comes from also not feeling like you have to defend the thing that you're doing. Like you believe in it and you're also not defined by it. It's like this weird holistic approach, I think.
Allie, how much for you when you were starting your stuff, even just freelancing for yourself full time, how much of it was like, this is what I set out to do, and then how much of it was like, oh, I like learned things along the way. I might have always known that I was going to do art, or I studied design, but I had no idea I'd be doing the things that I'm doing now. Really? I mean, specifically photography. I got like C's in all my photography classes in college. And I sold my camera when I graduated, so I think, and we've talked about it, Adam, like you from the start would be like, oh, you're a photographer. And I would like push that title away. Like, no way, I'm not. So yeah, it's shifted to accommodate my clients.
But you've also probably got way better at it too, right?
Yeah.
Like, you're really good at that.
Yeah. I'm still C average. No, I'm just kidding. To the point now where I think I'm a better photographer than I am than a designer.
Yeah. And even probably for both of you not being obsessed with the thing, right? It's like not being obsessed with suits, not being obsessed with photography even. Yeah. We go over to like Midwest Photo, and the guys who work the register know
way more than I do.
I feel like at some points I'm like, you guys are probably laughing at whatever we're renting, being like, this is so stupid.
No, they're not, because I basically say like, what should I rent? And then they give me the stuff, But yeah, I think like when you're not trying to be like a know-it-all or like the guru and you're just honestly trying to help people, I think it almost pulls you into innovation without trying real hard to be innovative. It's just having a really good it'd be like if
beat on your customer.
Right, or if like you, Nate, were preoccupied or worried about like what other online retailers were even carrying or doing. The same is true for us. Like we don't enter awards. Like we don't try to win awards, or I don't really care what other designers think about our work because I'm not making stuff for them. You could be wrapped up in like what fashion is saying, but your customer is just trying to like get their wedding party fitted, Yeah. So I think it's like, who are you trying to please or who you're thinking about versus, There's times where so many people are like, oh, did you see what this other creative person's doing? And I'm like, no, I like don't know what they're doing. I know like what all my clients are doing though.
I had a bunch of people asking about the photography Allie was working on, so I was showing them her Instagram feed just with the 100-day challenge and all of that stuff. And they were like, oh, that reminds, and they started listing off like all these photographers. Like, do you know of some local, some just famous? And I was like, I don't know us. And I walked through all the names with you. Neither of us know any of those people. Yeah. And it was wild. Yeah. Very different. So getting started, years 1 and 2, you have some struggles of, or you're sort of figuring out who your audience is or where that business, kind of fits in the market. What about as a business owner? Year 1 and 2, what were the things that you kind of just personally...
What emotions were you feeling?
Yeah. So I've always kind of said one thing I think is important that has worked for me as an entrepreneur is like having a really high self-confidence in like the very long run. Like I believe given enough time I will figure it out, but also like being pretty aware of your flaws in the moment. And in the early days, the flaws were like very fundamental basics of like understanding your own product and running a simple store and things. So I remember I've always been fairly confident, but I remember that probably being the first 2 years being the time where that confidence was like most frequently shaken. I remember like not being able to sleep very well and getting up at 4 a.m. and like going for a run because I felt like I was like anxiety was like driving me insane. And I still wake up at 4 a.m. often, and it's mostly like, oh crap, I said I was going to do that and I didn't, or it's a different feeling now. There's a little more of like feeling like I've have some ground to stand on at this point. But in the early days, it was like the simplest things seemed really difficult. I didn't know a whole lot about selling suits or tailoring suits or things that are like fundamental to, and it was at times just kind of overwhelming because I think a lot of people start businesses where they've worked in the industry or have some experience, and I hadn't sold suits at Men's Warehouse and decided I was going to start my own store. So it was, there was a fair amount of doubt of like, or at least knowing like this isn't very good right now. Like the people that are buying suits from us in 2011, 2012, it's not because we're the best place to buy a suit. It's because there's something about our story that connects with them. And like they like me, or they like Pursuit, or they want this to be something, but there wasn't a rational reason other than that why those first customers bought from us. Now I'd like to think like we're still not anywhere near where I want to be, but I think the concept stands on its own a lot more in year 5. And in the early days, it was just like, people taking a chance on something they thought was a good story or whatever it may be.
Yeah, I relate to that. We're year 4. We're 4 years this year, right?
Yeah. But you had a couple years before that of full-time your own stuff.
Yeah, but I remember thinking these clients in year 1 won't be our client in year 4 or 5, And you were reassuring in that, Adam.
Yeah.
And like we tell that to our clients now who are starting like one-person service businesses. Like your first clients probably won't be with you at the end,
Yeah. I always tell people to charge less and be generous and just be okay because you're going to make all your mistakes on your first batch of people, and you just want them to like not hate you a ton because you're going to fail them.
Right.
And you're gonna make all your mistakes at the beginning. I mean, you'd hope it's a lot more expensive if you start making mistakes now. It's like if Pursuit starts screwing up tailoring now, you're in trouble. You have a couple weddings in a row and a couple, But
you're trying to get me back to that anxiety.
Right. But I mean, you made all the mistakes. You learn all those lessons. I think it's important. There's a reason why it's those first, the first couple of years are just. You're just bumping into stuff that you're walking around blind in a room, and I think unless you have a lot of cash, or maybe like a very hands-on mentor investor which also is cash, right? So if someone showed up and was like, "Hey, I'm going to put a ton of money in your pocket to facilitate hiring a consultant to walk through your processes and a financial person to sort of get through," you would learn all those lessons really quickly. But not a lot of, most small businesses don't have that going on. The ones you read stories about do, and they typically don't tell you that they have that going on. Right. But you sit down with enough people and you're like, oh man, everyone's just blind, like walking around in a room and you're bumping into stuff.
Well, we've talked about how if we had worked with you, 3 years ago, it would have been a lot different. Like the experience of helping you out with photography and things like that. And we're now at the point where we want to figure out the best intersection we can have with our clients. At what point is it 2 years or more? Is it 4 years? So that they aren't wasting money.
Yeah.
That's really our goal.
But if we'd worked with you in year 2, you'd been like, oh, we're different, you know, we're different people, we're a different brand. You don't know who you are. What has been, so unexpected obstacles, what about unexpected successes or things you kind of backed into, like, oh, dang, this is like a benefit, or this is something that we're actually doing really well that we didn't sort of foresee being, I mean, you bump into problems, but you bump into good stuff too.
Yeah, so the whole concept, I feel like the way it started as a class project, I kind of joke now that I'm on the other side of it, that like the early pop-up store kind of felt almost like a thesis or like a PhD.
Yeah.
Like it wasn't real. It was still like this experiment. So it was always like small and nimble and bootstrapped. But it also was small and not throwing off a ton of cash, and it was my primary means of making a living. So some things kind of came along that helped, that maybe slowed down the progress of Pursuit, but actually allowed it to live to the point where it could like start to, you know, take breath for itself. So we ended up with this weird event that we now have run for like 6 years. That is the senior bar crawl at Ohio State. So that is an unexpected thing, that as a suit store, we also run the largest non-university sanctioned event at one of the largest universities in the country.
Yeah.
So we, through connections and friends, ended up involved in this campus tradition, and suddenly we were printing thousands of shirts and giving shirts away, making students line up for hours at the door of our store to get this free T-shirt that had nothing to do with suits. And so that was something that was not, it wouldn't make sense in a business plan, but it became this way for thousands of people to hear about our brand. It was our way to show that we were that, you know, we were not Joseph A. Bank.
Yeah.
And it's become this thing that at least pays for itself, so that it's a free marketing thing for Pursuit, or we can profit on it to the point where it can help subsidize our growth a little bit. So that was weird and unexpected, and helped us kind of get the word out when we didn't have a budget to do that.
Yeah.
And then the other thing was, you know, as we were tinkering with the concept of Pursuit, somewhere along the way, we ended up with a rack of Christmas sweaters in the back of the store. And I think the original idea was that we were a campus retail store, and it was the holiday season, and all the students were gone. And we were like, well, we got another month to go here. How do we get people through the door? And all the original fixtures from the store, like, the original store is embarrassing to look at. Like, why anybody would shop there, and like why I thought it was a good idea. Like, just horrendous retail design. But I had gotten to be really good at thrifting, and was always kind of interested in that, and ended up selling vintage Christmas sweaters out of the back of a suit store, which is also a terrible strategy and not part of a business plan.
Right.
But for like 5 years, we sold Christmas sweaters, and after a couple of years, we made it its own concept, and it was like immediately a huge hit. We had a store in Columbus and a store in Dayton for a couple of years, and it took a huge amount of my time, but we also sold like $200,000 worth of Christmas sweaters over the course of a few years that otherwise Pursuit probably, you know, Pursuit could have used my energy during that time. But that money kept Pursuit alive to keep tinkering. So part of the reason why at year, you know, 5.5, we still have one store, and we finally feel like we've got one prototype store, is, you know, it was bootstrapped, and we had these side projects that slowed us down, but also kept things going. And that, I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but it's what happened, and we learned a lot from, like, you know, retail design when you're building pop-up stores, and experiential retail when you're making this like really quirky, off the wall Christmas experience. So all of that was, these are things that I think we did because of how I came into the industry, not knowing much. Being like kind of fiercely independent, and like believing that this was going to be worth a lot of money in the future, and not wanting to raise investment money at a point where it was not worth anything on paper and give it all away early. That kind of fierce clinging to being independent like that forced, other things to kind of pay the bills. And so I have since shed the Christmas sweater business, and not because it was still going and still growing, but it got to the point where Pursuit needed all of my attention, and growing that was more important. And we're still doing the bar crawl, although I'm certainly looking to personally offload that shortly. But in the early days, Pursuit wasn't thriving enough. It didn't have enough customers that it could stand on its own, and my time could go to those things, even if it. So that was both a fun story, but also a lesson of at some point you got to prioritize too, and the thing that is your primary business needs your primary energy and attention.
And I think that's the thing throughout this entire season on this podcast, a lot of people don't realize that business owners are balancing their time or splitting their time between things, even if they're, quote, technically full-time in the business. Whether you're, juggling a part-time job or starting something on the side for cash. I think that's something that, I don't know, I sometimes get the sense that people are like, oh, you own your own business and you're not, on the street, so you must be doing really well. But doing really well means a lot of different things.
I remember when we first got our studio, everybody was like, congratulations. And we're like, all we did was sign up to pay money repeatedly for the next 3 years.
And somebody was willing to actually take
Someone
that.
was actually dumb enough to let us.
Not dumb enough. Someone didn't investigate our personal finances enough to know that
we tricked them.
We could definitely pay month 1, and then month 2 was iffy at the time.
Yeah. But I just think in general that perception until you're in it and you're up at 4 a.m, oh my gosh.
I think so much of when we started those 4 a.m. things, year 1 and 2, that craziness.
Take a deep breath.
So much of that I thought was just we had too much work or we couldn't balance our work a lot. But I would bet a psychologist could sit down with us and be like, no, you probably are just generically stressed about stuff. And you woke up or you couldn't sleep, and so you worked. I think some of that is just that. Some of it's just so, unless you were partners with somebody before who walked you through starting a thing, and you got to watch what they did with their personal time, which almost nobody gets to do. You just can't be prepared for. You can be prepared for the business plan. I mean, you can sit down and really, But even then, you're sitting through an MBA program with a bunch of other smart people and professors who are helping you outline what's going on, and you found out 3 or 4 years into it, you're like, this is really close to what it should be, but it's off. And there's no one preps you for for that stuff, and no one can. I don't think.
I was speaking last week. A friend is a high school guidance counselor at a charter school that's an arts focused charter school, and me and an engineer friend went to talk at career day with a whole bunch of other people, and which is a fun, fascinating experience to you forget what life is like in high school. And but one of the questions that they asked was about how much money do you make and things like that. And I think that's important. It's been so long now looking back at the first 2 years of the business, but I left my job, went to took 6 months off to volunteer for a nonprofit, and then went to school for 2 years and had a stipend that paid part of my bills and paid half my tuition, but I still graduated with $35,000 worth of student loan debt and no cash. And then I paid myself for most of the first 2 years by just racking up credit card debt, which is a terrible, I would never give that advice to anybody. But I always kind of looked at it as I had graduated from a very good MBA program. I saw all my friends get $100,000 a year plus jobs. Risk, yes, it's risky, but it's probably not great financial advice, but I felt like I had a fallback. So the risk was more just my pride of, am I going to go bankrupt, or am I going to have to go get a real job? But I didn't take any money out of the business for nearly 2 years. And I just started putting myself on traditional payroll, posted that on Facebook and LinkedIn, and talked about that. And I just thought it was oh, hey, that's a cute story. It's 5 years in, I I now get
a
paid
paycheck.
Yeah.
during payroll, just like my employees always have.
Yeah.
But like, what that actually means is so weird. Like, I've been paying myself. I've been living off of Pursuit for 4 years, 3 years at this point.
Yeah.
Now I'm just like,
it's more now. I'm just paying
structured
taxes.
it. I actually pay myself less now probably than I did last year when I was just taking money as I needed it.
Yeah.
But it's a symbolic thing of like, all right, there's some kind of stability where I can. But
you posted that on Facebook, and what blew my mind was all of the people who commented, like a bunch of local people who have businesses that are a decade old.
Well, we just started paying ourselves through payroll this year. I think
no one talks about that. Like, that's just the thing of like, everyone would be like, oh man, Pursuit's killing it, Wonder Jam's killing it.
But it's true. We pay ourselves less now because we have to like do all the officials and stuff. So they were like, yay, payroll. Okay.
Yeah, and I deduct like 50% right off the top because I know that my taxes are going to be on a higher amount than what my salary is, and like, but it's been a really long time, and like I think a lot of people either when they get into it, if they're naive to that, that makes it a lot more painful. Or if they're kind of looking in from the outside, like there are more obvious things that imply success or imply, especially in a world like yours or a world like ours where there's like pretty pictures and fancy events and things that make it look like you're living a great life. And I don't know, I've always kind of felt like I was minus the money part of it, like I was loving what I was doing. I was working really hard, and I kind of figured in the future I would make a good amount of money. But it looks like you're living this glamorous life. And I'm like, that the stuff that I'm doing, that I'm putting on Instagram is really fun. But I'm at the very early stages. I have not made it. I'm not. I'm 6 years in now, and I still don't feel like I've made it.
I mean, that perception of, even like you said, your day-to-day tasks are more exciting than what someone would experience in a cubicle. But that's also what has kept us inspired, or I think it makes the murkiness of paying yourself, it like balances out because you do love what you do every day. When do you think we'll retire, though?
I have this conversation at home a lot. Like, Mel's an attorney and has a equally as challenging, probably more stressful job than me most of the time. And it's so completely opposite. And like, the way the career progression as an attorney is paved for you, but it's a really long journey to become a partner at a law firm. And like mine, I'm like, well, someday someone might buy the business, or like, I don't know, maybe someday somebody else can be in charge. And like, it's also fluid and
someone
vague,
else will be passionate.
And she's like, do you think you're ever going to actually retire? Like, don't you think if you were to have someone else run the company, you would just like find something else to get all wrapped up in? And I'm like, but hopefully I'd do it smarter the next time I did it, where I didn't have to.
But if you had an insane amount of cash sitting in the bank, you would, to like see the opportunities in the world and not do something with all the cash sitting there would be, like, I'd be curious. I mean, starting the Wonder Jam starts to feel like, okay, like if I had a bunch more money, I know where I would pull people in. So we're just like working there. But if I had a bunch more money on top of that, I'd probably take like a year vacation. But then after that year vacation,
my retirement is that year.
I would dump an insane amount of money into coffee roasting business. Like, I would build that infrastructure like nuts. But I would be broke. I would just be broke again. Like, I would go immediately back to being broke again.
Back to your financial plan.
Well, that's only if you're alone. Like, I obviously will still be working. Well, I just mean, like, I will never, I feel like, just not do the thing that I like love to do. The thing I worry about is just like being relevant. Like, you have to work hard the older you get to be like aware of shit.
Like,
whatever.
It's truth.
I'm the 34-year-old at the moment guy with the megaphone at the senior bar crawl. I know that there's a shelf life on that part of my job.
They're like, who's that guy with white hair?
Some of our interns were like, I ran into Nate at the bar crawl. And then I was like, I hope you represented our company well to Nate.
But I think what I'm struggling with now is, like, it's really exciting that I'm now hiring professional people. And we're still a really small team, but we just basically doubled it with the 2 people that we hired last week. And I think it will grow significantly faster now than it has. But like getting myself out of the mindset of like, it all is reliant upon me. I have my hands in everything. This is I'm always on at some low level every waking minute of every day. Like, it doesn't need to be that way.
Right.
Like, I might not be able to just, cut it off and tomorrow, like, everything's fine without me.
For sure.
But like getting myself out of that mindset of like I don't like to use the word startup because I've never really felt like that's what we were, but but like the early stage where you have to do everything and you don't have the resources to hire people to do professional things. That's the like current struggle in my head is like I need to be able to like this thing needs to live without me being intimately involved in every aspect of it for my own health and sanity, but also so it can be more than just whatever my maximum capacity is,
and to take care of your client. I mean, I think that if I struggle with a lot of the same things as far as growth happens, getting myself out of it. We had Annie who helps us with our events and marketing. I was like, hey, I'll go get lunch for everyone, and she's like, no, I'll go get lunch for everyone. You work, like it was very much. It's just easy for me to sort of fall back into those stuff that at some point I shouldn't be doing. Yeah. Right. And I think, and our clients and customers benefit from me paying attention to their projects than from me getting lunch for everybody.
But don't you find like you get conditioned to feel like it's so fragile early on that like you have to like have your hands there at all times ready to catch it. Yeah. And like you get conditioned to not, you can't take your eye off it. Everything is critical because the margin for error is so low that like you just condition yourself to just smother it or hover around it. And like Ryan, who is my operations manager, has worked for me for 3 years now, but 6 months of that has been like running my store. Yeah. And I'm finally at a point 6 months into that where I'm like, problem comes up, nobody knows what the answer to it is. My initial reaction is to be like, here's what I think it should do. Be like, that's you, go for it. Yeah. And like realizing that he's probably more equipped to deal with it well because of his skills, because of his being in the store a lot more than me. But like my initial reaction to everything is just like, this money is my personal bank account. This business is 100% owner, Nate. Anything that gets effed up, is this a family podcast? No. Anything that gets screwed up is like it's me. It's I'm personally liable. I'm accountable, or it reflects upon me. And I'm like, there's a lot of people that know Pursuit these days that have no idea my story or who I am, and that's like there needs to be way more people. Yeah. They're here to. Like, they bought their suit from Pursuit, not from me. Right. Somebody else can do a better job of handling this stuff that I have historically handled.
Totally. I remember at one point thinking, whatever task I need to delegate, I can hold so tightly to it, but I don't even do it that well. So why am I holding so tightly to it? Why am I standing by? I have to do this when it's not my thing. Yeah.
Remember we had a business coach who was trying to delegate with like the initial conversation. Like someone would contact us through our website, and then we would have like a virtual assistant person like call them and interview them about their business and needs and stuff like that, and send us a pretty detailed breakdown, and then we would meet with them. Kind of like if you walk into a doctor's office, what that receptionary does before you see the doctor. And I remember we tested it once, and we both like hated it. And we realized we actually really love the talking to people part of the whole process. But it's been easier to delegate, surprisingly, design or even some of the photography in different projects we're working on than it is to delegate the talking to people part of it, which is the part we enjoy and dig so much.
I've kind of found that customer service is central to what makes Pursuit successful. And I also have yet to figure out how not to completely internalize the bad parts of that. So like, like a voicemail of a customer wondering if their suit's ready because it was supposed to be done yesterday. Like it could be our best sales day of the year and we could have had, 20 people come through that had a wonderful experience. But if I have this feeling that there's one person out there that is mad at us or unsatisfied, like that still ruins my whole day.
Yeah.
And I think what I've realized is like that's probably my personality, and it's totally counterproductive to doing a good job.
Yeah.
And like I just need to insulate myself from that part of the business, because
for sure.
Somebody else can do a good job of handling that without letting it sabotage their day.
It's not so personal,
and,
you know. I think we've even experienced that through hosting events here, and it's easy for us to know a lot of the people that want to collaborate on events personally, and having Annie help with those. She doesn't know those people, and she has more of a neutral viewpoint of it all. So when we get questions, I can easily become like frustrated or stressed out, or again like wanting to please people, and I think it's easier for her to be like, this is the policy, so obviously you know.
Policies are really hard when people look at you and know that you're the one that said it, like no, sorry, that's out of my control.
It's a policy. I just told someone yesterday that I was experiencing something with a client that is going to force myself to add it to our add a policy to our contract. And when that happens, it's always funny, because when I read contracts or something like, you know, rules or guidelines, I'm always like, well, something must have happened for them to make that rule. And that's what's happening.
It's like an obscure thing. It's like, hey, Thursdays after 9 p.m., please don't email me saying that you hate me.
My lease at the Gateway was the best, because it was like, you know, you can't have a strip club or a gambling parlor and then there was all these provisions that were written specifically for the other tenants, like a restaurant that derives more than 25% of its income from the sale of grilled cheese sandwiches, because Gooey's was there, or like every single big
you can like point it back
retailer was like, you know, like blocking them from bringing a competitor. So we could not sell grilled cheese sandwiches or university apparel or smoothies or whatever, coffee. I can't remember what all of them were, but I'm like, well,
at least you know.
I think I can see where that came from in this lease.
Right.
That's funny.
Yeah.
That's wild. Last thing, if you go back, talk to young Nate, just getting started, lessons learned, things you tell him to chill out, relax about in those first couple of years.
Young Nate.
Yeah, I think you know, the painful parts of it were probably the parts that I wouldn't want to eliminate.
Right.
You know, like I think most of the good learning happened with the stuff that was like the learn it the hard way kind of thing. So I don't know that I would change the bad parts per se. I think what I regret the most is like I've let myself get so consumed by all this that like somebody asked me on some forum or something a couple weeks ago like what my hobbies are, and I had to like say what my hobbies were, you know, like somebody asked me yesterday like what's new, and then they qualified it afterwards, but not business. And I'm like, you know, I have a great personal life with Mel and our dog Bruce, and it's such a tiny part of like current time, and then there's nothing beyond that. And like I see other people who have done a better job of having a business but not letting it like completely dominate their life. And
who, so we can interview them.
Who
is that? No,
person?
You don't have to say specifics.
Well, I mean, I think one thing that I see a lot of is like, you know, I'm 34, and a lot of our peers who are 34 like are married and they have children, young children, and they have a business, and maybe they're opening a second store, and like, but
their kids are like have activities, and they, you know,
so they appear to be able to juggle more than I've been able to juggle. And I don't know, maybe they're, you know, really stressed out, or maybe their business is at a different or better place. But I don't know, I think when I went back to school, I was like so passionate about so many different things, and like all of that energy that used to get spread across like I used to eat nothing but like unprocessed, mostly vegetarian. Like that was like this big value that I had was I read a Michael Pollan book, and then I lost 30 pounds in 2 weeks, and like was like an extremite in my views of the world's food systems. And now I don't do that anymore. Or I used to like ride my bike all the time, and like I've ridden it like twice in the last 2 years. I used to go to yoga all the time. Like I've done a terrible job of like, you know, spreading my energy out across multiple things. So I think I don't know how I would have changed that, but at some point along the way, a lot of those things just kind of slipped off, and then I like think about like, oh, when I get to the next stage, I'll be able to start going to yoga again, or take a vacation, or ride my bike, or eat better, or whatever it is. Like go to more concerts, all the things that that used to be like the well-rounded me. Like everything now that I do at least falls under this large umbrella of pursuit. Yeah. And some of it's still fun and personal stuff that like could be a hobby, but it's really it's really all in my head still like a business expense. It's part of the company.
For sure.
So I don't know. I think that is the part that I didn't figure out early on, that like were I to start a business again in the future with a pile of cash or without a pile of cash, like I think I would only do it. I'd like to think I would only do it if I felt confident that I could do that part better, because like another decade of diving right back into something like that sounds like a bad idea.
Right.
Oh, that's so.
I can relate.
I think part of what keeps us caring so much about the type of clients that we work with, more so than the amount of revenue we can derive from a client, is that part of it where we don't have, people will ask us a lot, like, how do you do all the stuff you do? You're like, well, we don't have kids, so that's like one, because that's the whole, half the people who go through coaching with me are moms, and we help them like figure out their schedule and calendar and where they invest their time, and they're like, I have 2.5 hours a day to run a business. So what should I do in 2.5 hours? Is dramatically different than
when you have 16 hours of,
to do. And what we're doing right now counts within that 16-hour window, and that's what I would do. This is like what I do at bars with my friends. And so it's how
talking about this stuff.
And so like how hard and stressful is this?
I feel like work. The years that we have tried to focus on something outside of work, because we've been so buried in it, and it has been our whole life, we definitely see it take away from the business, but in a good way. I mean, last year I really did focus on health, and it did take away from making money, and so you have to go into it thinking, okay, I'm going to have to give up some of that working time. Yeah. It is a sacrifice, but it's a good one.
It also forced prioritization of far as like, all right, so I'm only going to spend 6 hours and not 12. So what am I going to do in the 6 hours? And you
become more efficient.
You cut off all this stuff that you shouldn't be doing anyways.
But I think there's like, that's a relatively more prominent issue these days now, that like my business can be run through my phone, and it's always coming at me like there are no clear lines between anything. Like work is always just kind of on, but I might be in my sweatpants on a Tuesday afternoon, not at the store. And then like where there used to be, you had to go to work, and there was a clear line between like I'm at work and I'm working.
There's a work phone.
That doesn't exist for our generation nearly, or Michael's generation, or whichever generation all of us fall into. Like doesn't have that same like clear line between it. And so I think like this idea of loving what you do, and like people that are starting businesses because they just want to be passionate about what they're doing, the downside of that is you also just fill your life with like, hey, I had a band that I really like come to my store and get suits and shoot an interview yesterday. Like that is my social, like that's my fun for the week.
You see good people, though,
but it's still work. There's no line in between, and it's still you're still on. And everything's much more blurred, I feel like, now, with the way people structure their careers and their personal life blend together, and the way that their home life and their work life don't have that same wall built in between them in a lot of cases. That also burns you out.
We spoke at CCAD, and a student said, so how do you balance like personal and work? And we laughed, and we're like, we don't. I mean, we don't, in that it's completely blended. It doesn't feel like,
and I like that.
I like it. I grew there's room for improvement. But
I grew up on a farm, which is very much like you're dedicated. You're like
your life is.
We go on vacation. And it's like nonstop, and your buddies come over to play basketball, but then you have to go run, like do a thing, and then come back and play basketball. But you also have a basketball court inside of a barn. And a farm that doesn't make money, but like that's something rich people have. Like, so there's this thing where you're like, I'm living like a awesome,
but you work all the time.
The bank account full of cash thing.
Right.
What would you say if you're going back to young Allie?
What would I say?
You're starting. If you're like, if you're giving yourself advice.
If you went back to speak to yourself at the age that most people think you are today.
Oh, okay. So like 12. What would I tell my 12-year-old self? I would say, oh gosh, that's hard. I think I would say, that's like really difficult. I don't even feel like I'm the same person.
I know what I would
at all.
say.
To me?
Well, I know I would say, when we were starting the Wonder Jam, if we're like just talking about that, I would say for us, I would say make sure you keep like sleep. Sleep is just a big deal. So like just don't give that up. Because it seems like if we are well rested, then everything else goes pretty easy. There's so many days where I remember we were on this call in the early morning, and I was like, I really don't want to do this. I go, that's not true. You're just exhausted because you didn't sleep well. But you're actually excited about this call. You just have no energy for anything. And it can confuse you into thinking you hate whatever thing you're doing.
Right.
So I would say sleep would be the one, and then to just... at the beginning, we were like happy to not care about finances. We're like, we don't care. Like, we don't have to run this like a business.
We're free.
Like, it was so personal. It was so much that like rebellion against the places we had worked that we didn't like how corporate and structured that felt. And we paid for that. I mean, I think it took us. We had to learn that. Yeah. To pay attention to it.
I think I would have said, like, value communication above all else. So, overly communicate with a client. Set meetings between your employees or your contractors or your partners, because day to day you get so flooded with email, text, like deadlines that a week passes and you haven't communicated with anyone, which means you can't delegate, which means you feel frustrated, you feel alone. So whether you're communicating with someone like a mentor or you have to call like a friend, I think it's easy for you to like look up and like years have passed and it's like you've had a great life and you've enjoyed it, but I think you can miss a lot of that intentional communication.
That's the biggest thing between the two of us. Like if things if we have a project that we're like, hey, where is, I'm like, we haven't met in a while. Like we haven't had a meeting where
like we talk every day and we're together all the time. But and I have hit, I can identify handfuls of times where I've hit complete burnout and like where you're like, I actually threw my computer once on a couch, but still, it felt really great.
It was, oh my gosh.
I like looked around for something soft and I just like threw it.
But she holds it up above her head like she's gonna for real slam it. And then I forget if you said, what the fuck? Or goddamn it. I forget which one it was. And then she goes to slam it like full overhead, smash on the ground, but then at the last moment slows way down and then like
because I didn't want to have to buy a new
gently
computer.
Onto the couch. It was the least.
It still felt good.
Oh my gosh.
But a lot of that is like it's feeling alone, and I think communication like is a huge antidote to that.
For the record, I was being super annoying to you.
No, I don't think so.
Are you sure?
It was when I was designing that logo and my Illustrator crashed, and I never saved it. And I had spent like 5 hours.
Oh yeah.
I was expecting you were going to ask me about like the low point or like, and I had a story ready.
I think we're
that,
going into
which kind of relates.
What is it?
And it's like not probably an ultimate low, but just like a low day. We had this idea of we were going to do this pop-up model where we would like take the suits to campus, and we had a store on campus, but we were kind of figuring out like we don't want to have a store in all these college towns, so how do we like take the store to them? And it was before we built the truck, so we didn't have like a store on wheels like we do now. So we did this pop-up, and all our fixtures for the original store were built on wheels at the Idea Foundries with the idea of like the store can just roll in the back of a U-Haul and pop up wherever tomorrow. And that sounded really clever, and pop-up retail was this trendy thing at the time, but it's like a complete pain in the ass. Like to go through all that work to set up to hopefully sell something. And the very first time we did it, one of the guys that was interning for me at the time was in SAMI, a fraternity at Ohio State. And he was cool enough to like figure out a way to get. He had just graduated, and he's like, "Yeah, I'm sure my fraternity brothers would be the first host for this." And it is, Sammy's a predominantly or maybe exclusively Jewish fraternity, so they decided they wanted to schedule this on Easter Sunday because,
they're not doing
they're a Jewish fraternity. Yeah. It's not a holiday. And I'm like, hey, I'm excited to do this. Like, I'm not going home to see my family. So we did this event, and it went fine, but like we were setting up in a, like, what you'd think of as a fraternity house, like a house that 30 guys lived in that was, there was like pizza crusts on the floor and like it was sticky, and it was like this cool 100-year-old house that we had to haul these big wood crates up this narrow stairway, and like it was like sweating, working really hard. And this was like, to me, it's like, I feel like a microcosm of like the first couple of years of business, but it was like so much effort. And then we finally got there, and I think we sold like 4 or 5 suits, which back in those early days, selling 4 or 5 suits in a day was a good day.
Yeah.
But it was so much effort and energy and like physical exertion, and it went okay.
Yeah.
And it was Easter Sunday, and like, I hadn't called my family to like talk to them about the holiday and how everything was. And so I load up the truck with my intern, bring it back to the Gateway. Heads home for the night. I'm like, I'm just going to roll this stuff out of here and put it in the store. It'll take me another 10 minutes. So I go back out to the truck after unloading it, and the U-Haul is dead. Like, the battery is dead. I had left a light on or something like that. And it's like 11 o'clock at night on Easter Sunday, and I'm exhausted. And I call, like, whatever U-Haul's AAA type service is. And it's a holiday, so nobody's working. And so I'm exhausted already. I'm frustrated about, like, how the day didn't go as well as I had hoped, or shit, this is going to be a lot of work if we're going to try to do it this way. So I was a little disheartened about that. And then, like, I'm stuck there with a U-Haul blocking the loading dock at the Gateway, and I have no way of getting out of there. And I was on the phone with U-Haul's customer support, and they're like, finally at like 5 or 6 in the morning, when like the Monday shift started, somebody was able to come out and jump this truck. So I slept on the concrete floor of the store on Easter Sunday.
My gosh.
And I just remember thinking, like, all of this, I could tell this story 100 times to like my business friends of like how innovative and creative it is that we have this rolling pop-up store that we can take to a fraternity right before they need suits for the formal or the career fair. And then I'm like, in reality, this is like, my back hurts, I'm exhausted, like we put way too much energy into making very little money, and I'm sleeping on a holiday on the concrete floor of the store. Like that is Instagram reality versus what my life is actually like. And like there was many moments like that, but that was like the most like poetic, I think, of them.
Dude, we got crushed on the car rental over a Labor Day or a Memorial Day or something, where like returned it in another city, tried to call people, no one communicated with each other, and then we got a call like 2 weeks later. They're like, "Where's the car?" I was like, "I returned it to the
I had returned it in the suburbs." They're like, "Well, that's just an independent enterprise. They're not actually connected with us."
Like, so we didn't know about that, so we're gonna have to like send someone out there to. And it was like almost $1,000 for.
It's like a moving fee of the car.
Oh, sure. Like when you do a one-way rental and then they have to
go get it,
transport it back.
Yeah.
That was good. Is there anything else? We get everything?
Think
Is that all of it? Is there any other embarrassing? No.
I think other embarrassing stories.
Thank you for being on the podcast.
Thanks, Nate.
It's been
fun. Pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And if people want to learn more, follow along, where do they find out about you?
We have a lot of social media that is all Pursuit Yourself, and our website is pursuityourself.com, or you could just come to the store. If you're hearing this in Columbus, we are in the Short North. We're next to North Star Cafe, so if you're cool, you know where that is. We're right next to them. So.
Beautiful.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.